Hello, my name is Peter Cinnamon, and you're very welcome to a podcast which is all about the Irish League, where it is showdown weekend, everybody. Two massive games at both ends of the top flight, where full seasons will be defined and clubs' futures are very much on the line. Will we see brand new league champions by this time next week? And will a club be doomed to the trapdoor? We could be poised for the most anticipated Irish League final day for over a decade. And I think you've waited long enough. It's time to get down to business. Now, it's your latest weekly edition of Kick and Match. The games are running out. Soon the podcasts will be running out. But the temperature is rising within the Irish League, both at the top and the bottom of the league. And we're going to talk about it all with journalist and writer Barry Flynn. Hello, Barry.
Great to be here, as always. Thanks for having me.
And we should add in the third thing, because obviously you are Mr. Championship. We're going to have a second at the top of the league in the Championship. What's going on there? It's almost signed, sealed, delivered, but we can talk about that as well. Alas, this season, there's nothing to talk about at the bottom of the Championship, but that's a topic I'm sure we'll briefly peruse. But there's only one place to start, and that is after doing them, because we still have the Tuesday games to cover a wee bit as well. Doing them in the Cup, Coleraine did themselves a bit of a favour in where their hopes are going to be finishing second, and also help this title race stay alive in beating Larne. And then on Saturday, nothing really altered. Linfield didn't help their old pals Glentoran, but Glentoran also pumped up the scoreline against a Dungannon side who aren't on the beach, but they'd rather be playing at Windsor Park already. And it sets us up with 2 games to go for every team. And it all realistically comes down to the showdown between first and second, Larne and Glentoran, on Friday night at the Oval. Larne have not made this run-in easy for themselves. They are the favourites still, but there is Glentoran fans who are starting to believe once again.
Yes, it's a difficult proposition being a fan of Glentoran, because your hopes get raised so many times only to be dashed. Looking back on Saturday, Peter, I think there'd probably been a sense of despondency in the Glentoran changing room going out to play Dungannon Swifts, because the game between Larne and Linfield, prior to the game, you would have thought that that would have been potentially where Larne could have dropped some points, which would have put a different complexion on this. Now, when the game kicked off, and prior to the game kicking off, of course, people were talking about the team selection. But I think the world has moved on since then, because David Healy, it's his job to put out on the field what he thinks is going to benefit Linfield Football Club in the longer run. They'd no dog in the fight. They put out a young team, and people would criticise David for that. But one little fact I would point out is that last year they won the championship at Dungannon at the end of March, and then they played Crusaders on the Easter Tuesday, 4 days later, and there was only one player from the side that had won the game at Dungannon to clinch the championship, was actually out for Linfield against the Crews. On the Saturday, they got the trophy against Glentoran. He put out a full team, and why not? Because that's the team that were going to get the cup, get the trophy. That's the team that brought Linfield the glory. And then for the rest of the season, it was pretty much a reserve team that was put out. As I say, I think people have moved on from that, because it's up to the teams, Glentoran and Coleraine, to win this on their own volition. You'd rather have points in the bag than have to worry about anybody else. And David Healy's a shrewd manager. David Healy knows what he needs to do ahead of this European playoff. He needs to rest his best players to have them fit coming into that important game. So the 2-0 win for Larne put the pressure on Glentoran. They went out and they won 5-0, and it's left us now with this very intriguing situation at the top. Larne 3 points ahead of Glentoran, with Coleraine still in the mix there on 74, 2 points behind Glentoran. But looking at this game on Friday night, and I think I mentioned to you that I've met fans of Glentoran who have been at the Welders in Dundela for the past couple of years. They're actually going on Friday night to the Oval. And whatever way you look at it, Larne are still in the box seat going into this, because if Glentoran do win, get a win, that's them both on 79. But on the final day, you have got Larne facing Dungannon Swifts. And we all know, like David Healy, Rodney is just thinking about the Irish Cup final at this stage. So you would still have to look at Larne being the favourites coming into the weekend.
Because those who don't have the table in front of them, we have Coleraine who have confirmed themselves as a top three finisher this year, 74 points. Technically, they could win the league, but that is quite a far out proposition. Then you have in second Glentoran, 76, and then Larne first, 79. So a win for Glentoran on Friday would then see them go top on goal difference, as they would both have the same amount of points. It would definitely be going to them on goal difference going into the final game, because in a unique quirk, all of the top three teams have 39 plus goal difference. Now, Coleraine have scored the most, and for those who haven't checked the rules lately, the highest in a draw of goal difference, the highest goal scorers then win out. So Coleraine are the highest scorers, 74, Glentoran 71, and Larne 65. So you can add like a bit of a ghost point to Glentoran as the fact that if they're drawing on goal difference, they will be slipping ahead of Larne just because the amount of goals scored. But we are very much getting ahead of ourselves because, of course, Glentoran, it's all that win or bust. And it's not the only win or bust game this weekend in the league, but it's all on Glentoran. They simply have to win. Anything bar a win would just mean curtains for them.
Yeah, absolutely, and, Peter.
Of course, there is a scenario where it's a draw and then Glens beat Coleraine and Dungannon beat Larne, but you've kind of alluded to it there. That game between Larne and Dungannon, you may as well give Larne the points now. The interesting scenario, of course, is that if, and I'll keep saying this, if the Glens do beat Larne, what it sets up is a fascinating prospect of, well, two teams both trying to win, but it'll be a shootout. Yeah. Total shootout for the amount of goals potentially they could score.
Yeah, we may be jumping ahead. Now, this is all presuming that Glentoran can beat Larne. This is going to be a tight game. Gary Haven will have that side going down there to play a professional tactical game. They just want the point, in my view, if they get a breakaway goal and win it, which is a possibility. It's the beauty of football. But Glentoran will have to go gung-ho to get that win. They'll have a big Oval crowd behind them. But I've seen Larne go to the Oval, and they're professional. They know what they have to do. They don't have to just maybe have to soak up the onslaught. But if they get the point, with the prospect of going to Dungannon, I think, that the final day of the season could be just a mere formality. So Friday night is just going to be gung-ho, Peter. And it's going to be a beautiful game to watch because it's coming down to the do or die. You're going to have a big crowd at the Oval. You've got Larne coming there, knowing what they need to do. Glentoran need to raise their game, get that win, and then put that doubt in Larne's mind going into the actual final game. Okay, it is Dungannon Swifts within the context of the Irish Cup, but hey, this is football. And the other thing is that they could cancel each other out, and then Coleraine could win. So that could really put us into one of those let's go over to the Larne game. Let's go over to the whatever game. They could have the helicopter at Sprucefield Roundabout with the trophy on it. We don't know. But it could be an anticlimax. Larne could win. They could draw at the Oval, and then it's back in their hands big time. And the final day of the season, get a couple of goals early against Dungannon. But look, it's just conjecture at this stage, Peter, and it's the beauty of local soccer. And I mentioned about Linfield winning the title last year by the end of March. When David Jeffries' day, they used to call it OBE, over by Easter. And that, unfortunately, was the way it was too many times with Linfield being so dominant. So coming up now to the middle of April and then potentially beyond to coming up to the final day of the season, it's great for local soccer. It's great for fans. And that anticipation on the ground, speaking to people today about that clash at the Oval on Friday night, yeah, it's going to be electric.
The weird scenario that I do just want to mention now, before I forget about it, is that technically Coleraine aren't out of it. They're not being talked up as having really any chance because they would need things to fall
Hmm.
their way. But they're technically not out of it now. If Larne win, that's obviously the league
Yeah.
sewn up. If it's a draw, then you would need Larne to lose against Dungannon because, of course, Glentoran play Coleraine in the final game. But if Glentoran were to beat Larne and Larne were unable to get a victory against Dungannon, with the right goal difference, if Coleraine win out in their last two games, which obviously includes Glentoran in the
Hmm.
final game, that would be potentially the most unusual slipstream of it all. But it's one of the many scenarios. Like let's talk a wee bit just about Korean because they are the team that's had the most influence on the scenario that we have had.
Hmm.
Because we didn't get a chance to talk about Tuesday's game. We could tell that both Larne and Korean were going to go for it, of course, in the semi
Yeah.
final for the Irish Cup. And it was that firepower, it was the ability of
Hmm.
Shevlin and Cooper and co that were able to get in extra time to get that victory for
Yeah.
Korean. But on Tuesday, to go again
Hmm.
and take on a team like Gary even made the choice of just playing exactly the
Yeah.
same
Yeah.
side.
Absolutely.
And there was an early red card, and of course to swing all this goal difference, Corin pumped up the score
Hmm.
against them,
Hmm.
which has helped the Glens to make it even Stevens. So what role could that play? But I think Larne are the favourites because all they need to do is to pretty much get a victory within the next two games and not fall out of favour goal difference wise. But both Coleraine and Glentoran will think we're there, we're close, we're fingertips away from being in the same position Larne has been. But there's so many little moments along the way this season, and I am talking about both the Glens and
Hmm.
Coleraine, where they'll think we could be in a so much better position if we just didn't slip up here or
Yeah,
there.
there's plenty of results that'll be rude along the way, and misses will be, heads and hands in the changing room when this is all over and done with. But I'm going back, if you go back to 1993, 94, you may remember the final day of the season was Glenavon played Portadown at Mournview Park. And either one of them with a victory could have won. And Linfield were sitting in the background. They were playing Glentoran. And it was this very famous clip. I don't know who missed for Portadown at the very end. I can't recall what it was. But Linfield came through because it was a 2-all draw. And Linfield came through to actually win the title. And back then, it was a case of, it's the luck of Linfield. They've been in the whole race, the whole season, and they just kept going and kept going. So when you look at the way that the permutations are, Coleraine have been a consistent. Look at on Saturday what they did. They went two down against Cliftonville, and then they just moved it up 2 gears, 3 gears, and left Cliftonville in their wake. They have been the most attractive to watch. In my view, Joel Cooper, has just paid back any transfer fee in abundance that was for him. They're in the cup final. They're just chugging along, chugging along. And if you have a draw on Friday night and Coleraine get a victory, well, we'll have to see what happens because it could put a different complexion on any trip or Larne Dungannon game. But it's the beauty of it, Peter, isn't it, that we are still talking about three teams at this stage. And I say roll on Friday night because that could make Saturday afternoon when Coleraine go to Linfield so interesting within context of Larne's visit last week. So let's see what team David plays, and I would imagine David will play. Plenty of sort of reserves or second team. He has no ambition or need to put out the top side against Coleraine. If Larne could put two against Linfield last week, what could Coleraine do in such a scenario? We don't know, but that's the beauty of what we're dealing with.
Because that is a talking point in itself, in that, there's some teams that feel as though other teams in the league didn't do them a favour, and we'll get round to that. Like Linfield versus Larne, it started off the weekend. It was the early kickoff, and as you said, Glen fans were screwing up their face, not happy with the fact that Linfield weren't playing their strongest
Hmm.
team. Plenty of younger players. There's the likes of Finlay Ross, Oliver Wade. Where have these guys been all
Hmm.
year? There's Cameron Ballantyne in the 11, but they did not roll over. Now, it's an early goal for Larne, and really anything Even a draw would pretty much have been the result that Larne needed. But Larne did need to bounce back.
Yeah.
Like, they're playing against the big boys now. Some people have felt like any team that's up near the top, you can get a rep for being a flat track bully. And Coleraine have had the number of Larne on more occasions than Larne
Yeah.
have. And they do have to play against Glentoran in a real tight game. And those games between those two sides have been tight recently as well. So they needed to check that off, deliver. And despite it not being particularly a classic, Larne did the bit. So they've re-established themselves. They've halted the wobble, at least for now. And they've got, I don't really think it's momentum, but it gives them a more sturdy platform to go into this high-profile game, the biggest game of the season against the Glens
Yeah.
on
Well,
Friday
you'd
night.
rather be Gary Haverin going into the game on Friday night. To me, the performance against Linfield on Saturday, they got the 2 goals. They did what they needed to do, and as I said before that game, you would have seen it as a tricky scenario. And of course, David Healy's team selection sort of raised a few eyes. And I thought to myself, oh, that's because Glentoran didn't sort of clap them on the field last year. This is a bit of payback, but nobody's that petty. David Healy is thinking ahead because there is going to be, I'd imagine he is going to have to really look at the whole squad situation over the summer months at Linfield. So he needs to see these young and up-and-coming players, put them on into an environment like that, and see what they potentially could do in a blue shirt. And I can imagine that could be the way it's going to be in the next 2 games. But when you get to the European game, it's going to be back to the Linfield of old. It's sad at this time of the season that whenever there is a fight going on, Linfield, for example, when they're out of the competition and already got a European sort of playoff place, there's no divine right for them to put out the best side on the field in such circumstances. And I think any criticism of David is unwarranted. It basically just put it up to Glentoran to do what they needed to do on Saturday, and they put 5 past Dungannon Swiss. And for them to be 3 points behind it and on the same goal difference, absolutely superb. But Larne's victory, you call it a wobble over the last couple of weeks. They come out of Windsor with a 2-goal win. That is what they would have wanted going in there. The destiny of the cup is in their hands. And Friday night, to me, is going to tell us whether Larne are the team. If they can withhold Glentoran, get that point, or even sneak a win, well, that's it. Game over at that stage. But look, you can't cry over spilt milk about what team Linfield put out.
Well, look, we've spent plenty of time this year on this podcast talking about the discontent at Windsor Park and the feeling of apathy that many Blues fans feel, that they just think this is not going to be a quick fix. It's not going to be a one summer turnaround. However,
No.
David Lee's making the call. Like, you can look at it both ways. Like, they have a big game coming up. They have got a final, and look, the way things could be, it could be Coleraine coming in the town. It could be the Glens coming in the town for that European playoff.
Yeah.
Like that is the type of opponent that could come their way. In turn, it could be any of those sides below them. The League Cup helps them in that it's just going to be a one-off game for them, and that they'll hope that they'll be able to plan appropriately. But we have seen in previous times, and I'm more thinking about the Irish Cup, where a team's season's all but over, bar the Irish Cup. And Dungannon are doing a wee bit this season where you can't just play none of your first team, because then are you losing momentum? Are you losing fluidity? What about fitness in those vital last few games? So we'll see. If Kirk Miller was playing from the off and he was injured after 4 minutes, and that's him out for the season, fans
yeah.
are fuming, red card for whoever, 3-game ban or something. These are all, that's why you get paid the money to be the manager. So Linfield's season in the league is over, all bar their European playoff. For Larne, they keep on trucking. Now, the scenario based on the Tuesday night games set it up exactly as we said, where Glentoran were 3 points behind Larne. Larne needed to get the victory. They got the victory. But because Coleraine got that victory against Larne and then eventually got the win against Cliftonville, Coleraine aren't giving up yet. Because as much as they're guaranteed third, if they do not win the Irish Cup, they go into this playoff. So it is still within their interest to, one, keep up momentum, but also still try and catch Glentoran, and they still can. So therefore, as much as you would say Coleraine away compared to Dungannon, that's for Glentoran in the final game of the season, compared to the final game of the season for Larne, which is Dungannon Swifts at home, on the whole pumping up the scoreline point of view, like that is a more difficult game for Glentoran. Coleraine will also want to try and win that, based on if they can win this weekend. So the onus on Glentoran this weekend was not only to beat Dungannon, but it was to try and add to their total score-wise, and they did that. It didn't all come straight away, but bit by bit, as the game went on, they got their goals. 5-0, very healthy, and by all accounts, you listened on the radio as well as you were at your game, it could have been more. And look, there'll be plenty of moments. A season is made up of moments, but it'll be interesting to see where those goals vital. Were some of the goals that Larne conceded against Coleraine down to 10 men, will they be considered key and vital? We just don't know yet.
By margins, Peter. What about, was it the few weeks back? It was the penalty missed for Glentoran.
And you know, Glen fans will say this.
Yeah.
The who miss the red card, should have been red card penalty calls against Larne. Like, it's likely that Larne are champions, but Glentoran fans will go, there were so many ifs, buts, and maybes.
The problem is, of course, that people say that these balance themselves out over a season, which I think is nonsense.
I agree.
This is the thing people argue about VAR. If they miss that, sure, they'll get another goal, which I think is completely stupid, to be truthful. If Glentoran, Hoban had scored that penalty, a whole different complexion. And I think at that time, Glentoran were in the running for 4 trophies, and they went out of the Irish Cup, and then they lost that cup, the League Cup against Linfield. So Coleraine are sitting now on the cusp of greatness at this stage. They have the Irish Cup, they're going to the Irish Cup final, but as you mentioned, they could lose the Irish Cup, they could sort of trail off in the league, and it could be left with a season of, well, it was good, but it wasn't great, was it? We didn't really have anything to come away with in the first season for Rory Higgins. So we're tantalisingly standing at the cusp here for a number of sides. If Larne do a number on Glentoran, it could end up in a total disaster for Glentoran too, basically in the last day of Coleraine were to beat them. So football's a cruel game, as we all know, and there's no such thing as the magic genie that's going to come back and say you shouldn't have got that red card. The goalkeeper should have dived to the other side. Fine margins, and I'm sorry, but the gods of football do not work like that. And there's going to be one of these teams, one of the 3 teams, maybe 2 of them, are going to be very pained at the end of the season, because it would put a lot of pressure on Coleraine if they don't get into that spot, and then they're going to face the Dungannon in the Irish Cup final. If needing to win to actually get that European dream. So, yeah, look, it's still floating about in the ether. And Friday and Saturday will tell us an awful lot about character in these sides. And I still do believe that it's Larne's to lose, which I think a lot of people do as well.
I would agree with that, especially with the game against Dungannon. For Larne, even if you were to completely give Glentoran the victory on Friday. But for me, I do think, and so much of this game is mental, right? I do think for Glentoran, because it is at home and it is so win or bust, that they can go into this game knowing that they only have one option: win. And if you can, win by a lot, but just win. Larne will be constricted by this idea of, okay, and this is the nature of all these top 6 games, but if it's 0-0 with 20 minutes to go, Glentoran only have one idea. Larne are somewhat conflicted. Of course, if Glens have got 1 goal ahead, yet sure, Larne are going to have to go for it. Of course they are. Well, at what point do they decide maybe it's better just to take the 1 goal deficit and go and try and thump the Swifts? That will be the real interesting thing of, if it is 1-0 with 20 minutes to go, do the Glens try and sit on it? Do they try and extend that lead? And if they do try and extend that lead, how far do they go? Like, I do think that Larne have been here before. They have the players who have been here before. They know how this works, and they've played bigger games, far more bigger games than this Glentoran team have. But there's just sometimes an advantage just knowing we've got to go out, we've got nothing to lose. You need to win our home ground, and well, you know what? If we over risk it and we mess it up, it ain't great. But there's no half measures here. The Glens just have to win. And they do have the
Hmm.
attacking threat. And I wonder, will that feeling of Larne going, do we really want to push forward at this stage? Do we really want to go for that pass, push up that extra man, because it could be the difference? I could see it. I could see it being difficult. Look, I'll say it now. I do think it's going to end up being a 0-0, 1-1 draw. And at that point, Larne may start the celebrations there and then. They won't, obviously. But I do think there is something to the Glens just going, this is our cup final and we're going to go for it at home.
I do, but I have seen Glentoran Larne games built up over the last number of seasons, particularly at Inver Park, and they've ended up in a board draw, never mind a score draw. And you've got a professional team going onto that pitch in Larne. They know what they have to do. They need not to get beaten, and no matter what Glentoran throw at them, I think they have in defence, they have the capabilities. I could be wrong, of course, but when you talk about a low scoring draw, I think that's what could be very much on the cards. Unless Glentoran get an early goal, Larne, I think, will contain them and they'll pass the ball and they'll keep the ball. And unless Glentoran have a plan B, uh, maybe in the second half, get some sort of breakthrough, Larne are going to be very hard to break down. You look at the way that they conceded goals over the last number of weeks, which they didn't do over the season. But if they go to type, if they get that defence and that midfield worked out, and they're going to be very hard to penetrate. And that's Glentoran's sort of ambition, is to get an early goal, get in among them, get in amongst them, and then see what happens. If it's 1-0 with 20 minutes to go, Glentoran just can't sit back,
No, no, they
right?
can't because there's Lusty potentially and there's Andy Ryan there. And I'm sure anytime Glens fans see a ball being pumped into the box, they're thinking, oh, please don't Ralmy hit a hand.
Yeah.
Please don't anybody in a red shirt or whatever, if they have to wear the white shirt, fall down. It's going to be a nerve wracking game for both sides, but the Glentoran
Yeah.
fan base are going to go through the ringer on
Yeah.
Friday.
I said, I've said it all along. Historically, over the last number of years, it's being a Glentoran fan is one of the most difficult uh, positions in local soccer, because every time you think that it's going to come together, they let you down. Now, a lot of people will go to the Oval, the Glentoran faithful will go to the Oval, and don't be surprised if Larne nip one in the first half. They have Andy Ryan, whatever, they can just do what they need to do. That would be a bonus to them. But I have a funny feeling that Larne will be going out on Friday, not to concede, and basically maybe get one on the breakaway. But if it's a nil all draw, that suits Larne, and I think they're very capable on the night. Okay, they're going to be up against a raucous crowd, but I think they'll be able to contain Glentoran.
And that Glens fan base haven't got the best reputation for being totally the best
Patient.
cheerleaders. Let's say that the most positive cheerleaders, but you can only be positive going into a scenario where they haven't been in. And I'm sure that they've come closer than this, but this feels like the closest they've been in the 15 years since the very very start. Maybe it's 16, 17 now, but like
It was '09. I think they got 81 points on the final day of the season. They won their game at the Oval. Oh, I mean, it was sunshine football that day. Linfield finished a point behind, I believe, but it was always in Glentoran's hand at that final match to win. So Glentoran are actually depending on a number of scenarios, as we've discussed, and they're also hoping that the lords of luck and the gods are looking down on them. I just think personally that you look at the top six. I mean, the way Cliftonville got blew away on Saturday after taking that lead, Dungannon Swifts conceded five. Whenever Larne go or Larne are playing Dungannon Swifts, that is very much closer to the cup final. And maybe it's something that the league might want to look at, is that I think that the for three of those teams, sorry, for two of the teams in the top six, basically there wasn't very much to play for. And you look at the bottom six beyond the relegation battle. We're going to games on Saturday, Peter, but I think it'll be very hard outside those games we're talking about to garner any sort of interest or excitement from them.
Yeah.
That's just the way this season has
It
gone.
can be the nature of these leagues as they move on. Like Linfield, for example, they were champions before we even had a single split game, and now we have
Hmm.
really decisive games between, and it's set up this way as well, between what was 11th and 12th, first and second in the penultimate game. So
Hmm.
they're set up for this drama. It doesn't always work out this way, but it has this season. I've said this before. A big factor, I think, for the Glens as well. Will it play in? How much does it play in going into one game? There has to be a sense of anticipation of, right, we have this team. It's not, they're not going to hope it's a one season wonder. Of course they're not. But you look at this 11, particularly that we had on Saturday. Jordan Stewart has had a miraculous turnaround in his form.
Hmm.
Very key. Will he be able to repeat that next year? Because no one saw that. Is Cammy Palmer even going to be at the Glens next year, or will he stay injury free in the way that he has? Pat Hooban has had a fantastic season, but will he be able to continue next year? I mean, MJ Kamson Kamara, very surprised if he's at the Glens next season. You might even look at Ryan Cooney and Danny Amos. Will they decide to try their luck elsewhere if bids come in? So look, football, the nature of it, there is going to be turnaround and changes, but in particularly for Glentoran, what's worked this season, it hasn't been lightning in a bottle, but it's all come together at the right time, and for them and Decky Devine, they need to kind of snap here when the iron's hot. However,
It's the
yeah,
expectation as
yeah,
well, Peter. It's constant pressure, being the manager of Glentoran, and we know the number of managers that Glentoran have gone through. Declan Devine, when he came in, he said there was a big job to do to turn the side around. It's it's been good and getting better this season. But you look at what will Coleraine do next season? That's the big
they,
question. Linfield will
yeah,
come back. To what extent can Glentoran kick on? I'm sure Devine has got players in his head. But you look at people like Pat Hoban, goal scorer extraordinaire. Um, he's at the wrong, what is he, mid 30s, whatever. Will he want to stay for another season? We don't know. But we'll see. Glentoran, I'm sure the fans will go away at the end of the season and say, okay, 8 out of 10, 7.5, 8 out of 10. I think the league's beyond them. But you look back at the bitterness, you'll say we lost. We were in 4 trophies at one stage, and then we lost the Irish Cup, and we lost the League Cup final. It's a very demanding place, and there's nothing like standing under that stand at the Oval as a manager because you can hear it in acoustic beauty, the noise coming off it. You may recall a number of years ago that they actually moved the dugouts to the far side of the Oval, right? And I don't know why they did it, but maybe I think it was the time that Alan McDonald was there. But where the dugouts are now, if it's a bad first half or a second half, you just go out, turn left, and you're in to underneath the stand at the Oval. And I remember being at the Oval whenever the Glentoran bench was coming across, led by the manager, after a bad first half, and the fans in that stand waited, and the noise grew as a crescendo, and it was very difficult. They moved those dugouts back to the stand side, but it's very daunting. Glentoran fans will clap their players off the pitch at 10 to 3 when they go in to get changed to come out every Saturday at the Oval. But my goodness, if you don't perform, they'll let you know. And it's the average Glentoran fan. You need to get, what's the considered view of this season? Is it good enough for them after since 2009 if they do not win a trophy? And we don't know. But I think, you know, the jury's not out on Declan Devine. He'll follow through next season with what he's done and he'll try and build on it. But it's a very short window and it's a very short patience you're dealing with there with the collective fan base.
let's just reflect on Saturday there for Coleraine. 2-0 down at home. You might think, oh, they've had their 2 days out against Larne and now they're faltering early on. Two down with 22 minutes on the clock. Joe
Mm-hmm.
Gormley with his traditional be more excited to celebrate in front of the opposition crowd than maybe his own. And then Coleraine not only bring it back before half time, they go through the gears and they
Mm-hmm.
6-1, and of course that sets them up where it looks unlikely, but it gives them a real boost in the goal difference. sticks as well.
It does. The person I felt most sorry for on Saturday, and there's a picture in the Telegraph today of Jim Magilton with a head in the hands because Cliftonville went into a 2-0 lead. And you have to ask the question. I know he's got an injury crisis there, an absolute crisis. And he said that he's never seen anything as bad in his managerial career. But for how long can Joe Gormley be that person that gets the Cliftonville goals? And there's nobody, okay, injuries and all that. You go 2-0 up. What happened that Coleraine were allowed to go through the gears like that? And it became a rout at the end. And this is what Coleraine are capable of. Joel Cooper, and he's just untouchable at times, especially at the showgrounds. And Shevlin, what it's very hard to play against when they want to play. And whether the proverbial, what are we doing here? We're two down to Cliftonville. They did what they needed to do. They were a joy to watch, and Cliftonville just wilted under that onslaught. So, Peter, it's what they're capable of, Coleraine, but doing it week in, week out, week in, week out. But when you're playing a Cliftonville side that is dishevelled like that there, that must have been hard for any Cliftonville fan that went up there thinking we're 2-0
Yeah,
up and then whoosh.
that's the thing. Magilton's blooding these players is no real option. They have skill, they have quality just bubbling underneath. Look, they're fleet of foot but lacking in guile, and I think results like this are going to come their way. How it all shakes out next year, I don't know, because I don't think they're a couple of months away from, because they've got a couple of old heads in there. Hale, Gormley, Curran, will they stick
Mm-hmm.
around? We don't know. I'm Pepper, but in turn, you have the next generation coming through, Healy, McStravick, etc. So, look, we know what the issue with Cliftonville here. There hasn't been investment,
Mm-hmm.
and they're using whatever's left in the cupboard.
Yeah, and the problem is, of course, Peter, is that Cliftonville were holding out for the third year in a row to get into the Irish Cup final, and not getting into the Irish Cup final has hurt, and also anything in a no European dream. I'm very surprised. Well, I'm not surprised that the Cliftonville fan base, they seem to be, they're not sort of criticizing Jim. They know there's issues at that club, and the way that the whole deal fell away is only going to add to that over the summer. And Cliftonville, and let me tell you, I know from experience, when Cliftonville's doing well, the crowds are there, right? But whenever they're going mediocre, and you can just go to YouTube or go to the BBC and look at games Cliftonville played, you know, late noughties, early 2011, 12, Solitude at that brand new stand, it was empty because the Cliftonville passion fans had no reason to be there. And then they won the league, and for a number of years it was great. But if Cliftonville become a middle of the table team, basically that'll impact on the club, it'll impact on the income, and they need to do something about that. But Coleraine, hats off. To me personally, I think the Coleraine, they might use this season as let's just give it a go. But next season, I think they will be the polished outfit, that they will not drop the points or make the mistakes that they have, because they'll be very wise. Higgins has got great links with the League of Ireland, Derry City, etc. And I could see him strengthen. And with the team with the beating heart of Cooper and people like Shevlin there, you're talking about a team that's waiting to go to greatness, in my view, not this season, but next season. And at the start of this season, you were saying the showgrounds had, 3,500, 4,000 people. They're the best supported club in the league for a long time. There's that anticipation, a big provincial club, Coleraine. And okay, we'll see what happens this season with the Irish Cup and whatever. But next season, hey, I think Higgins is just waiting to flick that switch.
I would agree with you there in the sense that they look like the best setup team going into next year, but a lot could change. I do just want to reflect on some of your comments around Cliftonville because, let's be fair, some of their recent attendances have been getting a bit of stick online, as naturally you would see within the Irish League, saying where are all their fans gone. I feel for a lot of Cliftonville fans because that club and that squad, it feels like a flower bed that doesn't get any water. It's just, well, if something grows, something pops up, well, it's just by chance, just by luck, and we'll see what this summer will come for them. Will investment come back around again? Are we just waiting for the season to end and then this switch up at the a board level, will it change anything? It's like for a lot of teams, big summer for Cliftonville. We already said Dungannon, a week there of a couple of beatings, but I think they're not worried about the scoreline. They're worried about what the trainer's room is looking like, and if the trainer and the doc isn't a busy person over the next few weeks, mission accomplished, because they have
Hmm.
got a big job on their hands in the Irish Cup. No doubt we'll talk about it in the next few weeks. But Rodney needs to get his best team fit and firing and craft it so they can take on a Korean team who is finishing the season with aplomb, and he'll have to really go in and pull something out of his box of tricks, because there's no doubt 1 to 11 Coleraine should win out in the final, but Ronnie's been here and done it before, but he
Hmm.
can't do it if Adam Glennie's carrying a knock. Bigorama can't play more than 60 minutes, so he has to manage this side. If Danny Wallace is crocked against whoever coming up in the next few games, that could be
Yeah.
the difference between winning back-to-back Irish Cups and not.
I think from Rodney's point of view, and I watched them play Cliftonville, absorb the onslaught, get that goal, and then of course Cliftonville score with the last kick of the game. But then I still felt that they would have the courage to go and win the penalty shootout the way they did last year, held out through extra time with 10 men. And they did. They've been there. They've bought the T-shirt. And Rodney, if of any manager of an opposition team, I wouldn't want to see in their dugout would be Rodney McAree, because he knows exactly his strengths, how to play to those strengths. And let's be realistic, that win for Dungannon Swifts last May against Cliftonville was the greatest day ever since Philomena Begley got the number one on the charts with Blanket in the Ground. That's my only sort of reservation about Dungannon actually getting into the final, because Philomena said she'll break her touring schedule to be there. But big days like that, they know what it's worth, and his team and his side and the whole club is just focused on that day out. And I think if I was Korean, I would. It's no formality, absolutely no formality. If you don't play on the day, you'll get punished, and that's the way it's going to be. But for Cliftonville, wow, that is going to be one close season of, talking and straight talking in the boardroom. And where do we go? Because as you mentioned about the fan base, Cliftonville were always an occasion-based club to cup finals, that all turn out. And unfortunately for semi-finals, the ones that you don't want, the Windsor Reds, as they're known as, because they just go to Windsor Park to support Cliftonville, they would come along. But, in the cold uh, light of day, when Cliftonville look back with hindsight over the traumatic season they've had since this takeover was first mooted, um, it basically there's scars in that club. That's my view. And I don't know where it goes, because a mid-table Cliftonville is not going to benefit anybody in that North Belfast area.
This other half of the league and the headline of it could have led any other podcast. It's one of the other massive stories, not only from this week, but this season. It's been expected, but it's confirmed. One of Crusaders or Glenavon will be playing championship football, potentially both, but we'll not get too ahead of ourselves there. And leading into that split, all the momentum was with Glenavon. They had pulled it back from at one point 12 points, and they had Crusaders down below them. And even people like myself were saying, I just can't see the way that Glenavon are playing, the way the Crusaders are playing. Any other turnaround, Glenavon are just going to take those one or two extra steps, and Crusaders might not win another game before the end of the season. And, you know, they haven't had a great split so far, really, either of the sides. Glenavon have
Hmm.
been picking up draws along the way. Um, and, you go to Tuesday there, where Glenavon, they're kind of struggling against this Ballymena team whose season was over probably in January, realistically. But they weren't safe yet
Yeah.
either. And then I was at Seaview waiting perhaps to be the week where it was all over for the Crews, bar the crying. And look, I thought banger in that game against the Crews. They got their goal. I said it in my reporting. Crews were making all the chances. None of it felt great. They were all kind of off the cuff half chances. But banger, they know
Mhm.
what they're doing. They got their goal. They were incredibly incisive. Crusaders dreadful on the ball. Banger were just going to sit back and let Crews do their best, try and play around them because they couldn't. And Bangor were going to get a win,
Mhm.
and they were going to
Mhm.
secure their top flight status for another year. But just as time was running out, Crews get a late goal, 94th minute or something of
Mhm.
injury time, and it looked as though that was going to save them for another weekend because Glenavon could only draw with Ballymena United themselves. And we go into then this weekend where Crusaders were going against a Portadown team who themselves their season was over. They were safe. They're going to be playing top flight football next season as well. Glenavon, they had to try and win out against Bangor away
Mhm.
from home. And you know what? I talked to Lee Feeney after the Crusaders game, and I said, "Well, that's you guys, home and hose now. I'm sure." And there was big celebrations at Seaview, and he was determined. He says, "We're not going to roll over. We are going to take it to them. We've got games to play, and here we go." And they lived up to that. And Glenavon's mid-Ulster rivals Portadown did not. Thumped
Whoa.
they were by the Crews. That only adds further salt into the wounds because Glenavon could be down by this time next week, by Saturday afternoon, and and for the Crews, they've got a lifeline. It's in their hands once again.
Yeah, I mean, I did that Ballymena game against Glenavon last week, and to be truthful, watching it, Peter, I could see why the two sides had struggled all season for large parts of that game. Ballymena got the opening goal. They looked the slicker, they looked the hungrier, but then Connor Falls equalised with a wonder goal, right, to really put Glenavon back in it. But as the game came to an end, Ballymena they upped it a gear, and it was backs to the wall right up to the end. So Glenavon got their point from that. But then when it comes to you look at basically Glenavon on Saturday, 0-0, and you say to yourself, when you look back at the season with hindsight, you're going to say that missed chance has put us in this situation. But I think personally, the problem is when you look at the start that Glenavon had to this season, I think they were written off by the start of November or before Michael O'Connor came as just write them off because they're the relegation prospect. And you look at Crusaders, that win on Saturday will give them such a boost going into the game this weekend. But it's a 50-50 game. And it's a bit like the top of the table. It's too hard to call. You're going to have two teams going against it on Saturday. But one thing I will say, we talk about the sides have nothing to play for. I would not like to have been in that Portadown dressing room after that performance because Niall Curry's interview afterwards, a word scathing, hands up, not good enough, etc. They're on the beach. Could you imagine what he said to them inside there?
Well,
Wow.
I was surprised because looking at both the teams, because there was so much chat earlier on about, well, Linfield have played the young players, etc., and Portdown haven't really been a team that's blooded much youth in recent times. And from the
Hmm.
games that I've covered from them, it seemed to be not a huge amount of changes. You had plenty of experience. UKEC, Gary Thompson was in there. You have
Yeah.
their first choice centre backs of Alton Top McKinnon, and they got thumped.
He did mention the B word there on the beach,
Well,
uh, which, you know, where were their minds going out
because
there at
actually,
that
if you talk to
stage?
Portland fans, they thought, yeah, they wanna see Glenavon suffer. Port's been relegated, for a couple of years and all that type of stuff. But from a Portdown perspective, from an absolute pure coffers point of view,
Hmm.
Glenavon makes more financial sense to be in the league than the Cruise. I know you don't think
Yeah,
about that as a
I,
footballer, but
I agree totally. But I mean, Glenavon were losing that sort of mid-Ulster derby for a long time as well. But then when you look at Boxing Day, I covered the ports against Glenavon, and when I look at the income that would have been generated that day, you can see the benefits of that. But I think when you talk about fans, this slap it up the mentality, they would rather see, Portadown fans would rather see Glenavon because they would like to have that bit Ulster rivalry and Boxing Day game, of course. But yeah, it was very fickle are the fans. But look, this is the main game on Saturday. It's going to be the commentary game. It's boiling down to this. Personally, if Glenavon were to come out on the wrong end of this, they will not, they will look back on the opening part of the season and say that's where the damage was
Yeah, of
done,
course.
and it was too late to turn things around for Crusaders. And I know this season has been a shock to the system for Crusaders fans. I work with a few of them, and Saturday was a real boost to them. But Crusaders fans, was it 2005 they went down? I think it
Mm-hmm.
was Stephen Baxter's first year, or he
And
came in.
around that, yeah.
Uh, it's a shock to the system. And I mean, to us as people who report Crusaders, they're always there, thereabouts, whether it's the Irish Cup or the Irish League or the League Cup. Uh, you wonder going into a 16-team league, nothing's guaranteed. These two sides know that going down is going to be potentially so devastating because let me tell you, Moyola Park will not bring many people to Seaview nor to Mourneview Park. What will happen to either of these two sides if they go down for sheer income, uh, coverage, whatever. And I know going to every hole in the hedge in the championship, it can be disheartening sometimes, and you try to get the benefits from it. But for Portadown, that was so hard for them. And you talk about Niall Curry and the squad he had when they were in the championship. He talked two or three times about a clear out because they say they weren't playing for the shirt. I saw Portadown go down to Ballinamallard and get duffed 3-0, 4-0. And that was a real hard thing, but Portadown came through that time, and they won the league that day at Duntella. 4,000 people at the game at Shamrock Park. But this is going to be painful. And going out on Saturday, what is at stake for these two sides? It's not only income, it's pride, it's it's the thoughts that you may not get back up here for 3, 4 years. You've no divine right of doing so. So it's not exactly dropping out of the Premiership. Well, it may be because you do not get any parachute payment either from the Irish League to go into the Championship. So this is painful for both sides and both clubs.
Well, I think you could potentially argue that Glenavon with this investment, which seems to have come through, that actually they might be the team who could deal with it better than a Cruise side who have seen a lot of changes. It's been talked about here for the past few weeks. Really, who are the Cruise players that are going to go down with the ship and be here fighting next year? That's currently in that team. Well, I'm counting maybe Tuffy and Robbie Weir there. Like, that's a team that has suffered because of so much change. And Glenavon, if there's been plenty of people already reviewing how has this happened for Glenavon, and they say, well, too much change, wrong players brought in, recruitment, etc. So it's just such a flip. And look, any two of these teams, Glenavon win on Saturday. They're at home at Mourneview Park. That's their patch. And all they need to do is make sure they don't lose on the final. Well, they'd have to win, again, depending on Crusaders' results. So it could ping pong back and forward. But the Crews, in a kind of similar vein to Larne, they win, they shut the door and stick the lock on. Mm-hmm. It's done. And there is a clear attraction to that. Because if they're drawn, Glenavon get the win. It's 2 points between them.
Yeah.
Like, the Crusaders will really just want to take their shot and make it count.
Yeah.
And Glenavon have struggled. You see what the fans have said. Like, they haven't lost in the past 3, but the momentum's gone. The urgency seems to have evaporated. They've ran out of steam. The bounce is no longer there. And I kind of alluded to it there. Like, it could be a one-off for Crusaders against a Portadown team who really didn't want to be there. And for the past, 8 games, they don't seem to have wanted to be there. They haven't won since back in February. But
yeah,
what Crusaders have is attacking intent. They do have players like Bryden, and as much as I was really, really, really not impressed by them against Bangor at all, I'm very surprised they are where they are. But it's close, and that's the way it goes. It's so hard to
Mhm.
pick because I can see either team take an early two goal lead. It's you've got two teams who just seem a bit.
Yeah. I mean, that result on Saturday for Crusaders, I mean, the Scots guys, McKechnie, Dunlop, Fraser Bryden. Look, the one thing you can guarantee if Crusaders go down, they will not be at Crusaders next season. Uh,
No.
Plus, I think going down, you look at Glenavon too, players might have clauses or something. They'll not want to go into the championship. And I've noticed the teams that you need to sort of rebuild in the championship and try and get a few guys coming down. You look at the lorries, for example, at Limavady, and it's going to be a very changed team, whichever team goes down. But it really is standing at the crossroads, at the cusp of the precipice, and you're staring into the pit because to me, this is just so much money, finance, pride at stake here. And for Glenavon, a very proud club. Uh, they can look back and say, look, it was the start of the season was a disaster and we just couldn't turn it around. Michael did his best, but it has zigzagged, seesawed between Crusaders and Glenavon. 2 weeks ago, people thought Crusaders were going to go, but look, to me, Crusaders with that result last Saturday, they're going down to Moorview Park with a bit of belief. And if Glenavon lose a goal in the first half, I think Crusaders could kick on. But to me, for the fans of both clubs, the thoughts of going down is just not comprehend. It's hard to comprehend at this stage. And wow.
Yeah, it could be a strange, messy game. Look, I can't speak out of two sides of my mouth here. I can't say I think Glentoran, with the fact they're at home, they know it's on the line, they just have to go for it and try
Mm-hmm.
and win. That Glenavon don't have
Mm-hmm.
that. But in turn, they've just had these strange games against Ballymena. They had their chance at home against
Yeah.
Portadown, and they couldn't finish the dinner. So, I was really excited going into this last stretch about McGovern, Ferris, Peter Campbell, as well as what Falls has done. And they have got goals along the way, but they missed a huge chance against Bangor. Like they really did. That 0-0. This has been what Bangor's safety has been all about. We should mention them a wee bit here. Like safety, you see all the Bangor fans online saying, "Who thought we were going to finish 12th? It was going to be over by
Mm.
December." Here we are playing football next year. I mean, the trends of the second season syndrome in the Irish League is as real as it gets. Portadown is the first team in a number of years to have broken that
Yeah.
streak, and I think Bangor are going to have to dip in because people will be looking at some of their better
Mm-hmm.
players and where will Bangor find these new bodies because they're going to have to refresh no matter
Yeah, I
what.
was speaking to people
But
from the Bangor, and yeah, that plan is in place over the coming months because they know the reality of this, and you just need to go to Loch All, and you'll see what the reality of sustaining that is. And I was very surprised because every team that comes up has its sort of little glory patch. I was very surprised because Bangor, that opening day win over Cliftonfell, yeah, basically that's the feel good factor kicking in. But I was surprised that they were then dragged into this relegation sort of situation, before it became very apparent that the Crews and Glenavon, they were only safe on Saturday. So I was surprised about that, but that's you will come up from the championship and you'll sort of dazzle a few teams, but at the same time, it's the sustaining that and the stamina of that. They know what they need to do for next season, but I thought they were a joy to watch at times. They acquitted themselves well. And you're right about Portadown. I mean, uh, Niall Curry's very happy to sustain that. But I mean, the cold, stark figures are looking at us on the table, your top six and your bottom six. Dungannon Swift's getting into the top six. That's to me, a reflection on that club. But the haves and the have-nots in that Premiership is just becoming so apparent now when you look at the difference in points, and you see that a team like Crusaders and Glenavon, both teams, the difficulty they've got themselves in this season. Who will it be next season? Ballymena, Carrick Rangers? I don't know, but the you're relying on limited resources within limited how are you going to sustain that is a bigger question for the local league. And then I look into the championship, and with maybe touch on that later. And you think there's haves and have-nots in the Premiership. You want to go into the Championship. I can tell you there's a stark difference there. And sustaining this on a longer term basis, we need to sort of really think this through because, yeah, well, I just feel sorry for Crusaders and Glenavon. I've never ever seen either of them in the Championship, and yeah, it would be a loss to the top, the top flight.
But that's what we love about this sport. It is the great equalizer. Reputation and heritage means nothing. You've got 38 games, make it count, and it's just been such an up and down for both those teams. And I can tell there's some people out there saying, even if you finish 11th, you aren't out of the woods yet. And that,
Yeah, who am I to talk? But what the one thing I will say, as I mentioned on Saturday, they know finishing 11th, Anna United, to me, something's gone wrong in that club. That result on Saturday against Queens,
yeah.
that shouldn't have happened at this stage of the season. Um, they've always been the bridesmaid, never the bride. They might come out and they might sort of in a playoff against whoever. They might up their game, but I've always said over 2 games, Peter, it's very hard for a championship team to sustain that against a side that's been playing against higher opposition. Carrick Rangers, I think they sickened Anna last year. They had the game over within about the first
And
half.
Carrick were so poor last year as
Yeah,
well.
but they did a number on them, it was Heatley and whatever. And Anna didn't know what hit them by the time they went to the second leg. You might as well have just called it off. And I think that hurt Kieran McGurgan. But there's also, to me, that result on Saturday within context was not meant to happen. And I was at the game, the Mabadi game, and when that started filtering through to Inver Park, that Queens were 2, 3, 4 up, the look of, my goodness, what happened there on their faces was, and it doesn't augur well for them in any playoff situation because the spine of that team doesn't seem to be performing the way they did at the start. A bit like Glenavon, they had such a bad start to the season. If they go down, they look at that and say that ultimately was our problem. For some reason, Anna United had a perfect start to the season, was it?
Yes.
And usually they finish strong. So as Ian St. John and Jimmy Greaves would have said, it's a funny old game. And will Anna be the bridesmaids yet again? But if I were to finish 11th in the Premiership, I'd be quietly confident of taking Anna out of the equation in a playoff.
Well, maybe they're doing it in reverse. Like, there's other games. The one thing that should be referenced here is that, like, outside of a result where Crusaders win and Glenavon are down and then they're down in front of their own home fans,
Mm-hmm.
the final game of the season for both those teams, be it a win for Glenavon, they would then jump 1 point ahead of Crews,
Mm-hmm.
or a draw, of course, which would keep that 2 point buffer that the Crews have. Both Glenavon and Crusaders are at home, final game of the season. Crews play against Ballymena, who I said are maybe the most beachiest of beachiest sides this year. But look, they got a victory on Saturday, which we'll talk about. Glenavon go against Carrick.
Peter.
Carrick
Yeah.
don't look like a team that like, as much as they've got a huge end of the season coming up, they've yet to give up themselves. Baxter is getting that team continuing to fight and keep themselves red hot.
Yeah, Peter.
They'll have no mercy.
The problem is, and you've seen it and I've seen it, I mean, the last day of the season in the Irish League can be the most underwhelming sort of set of games ever. You don't know who's going to turn out, who's going to be put on. But, a lot of teams had nothing to play for. Okay, Crusaders and Glenavon may have something to play for. But I think it was up to about 20 years ago that bookmakers wouldn't even take bets on the last day of the season in the Irish League because nobody knew what was going to happen or whatever. But to say underwhelming, okay, if Crusaders and uh, Glenavon have something to play for, they will go looking because they have something to play for, but the other teams may not. Maybe Pride, okay, contracts may be on the line, but they will be blooding, youngsters, they will be blooding, bringing guys up, giving people a rest. So this Saturday to me is the business needs to be done. And say, for example, if Glenavon do win, it'd be very hard to read into the final game of the season if they're relying on, Crusaders to mess up. So this Saturday is Glenavon's probably last chance lottery. They need to win, but that will not guarantee that they're going to get into the Premiership because it's a lottery the last day of the season. A lot of sides have not a lot to play for. They will put out the seconds. And if Crusaders need to actually go and win on the last day of the season, what they did against Portadown on Saturday, I think they'll be very capable of, on the final day of the season. But what the first one in 13 games on Saturday, was it a flash in the pan? Might Glenavon just be ready for them? We shall see, but it will still give us that final day of the season kick around scenario.
Well, it's been up and down, and all eyes and ears will be on that game at Mornview Park. It's just huge and how it will impact the future of
Uh,
two clubs who have been such stalwarts of the league in the past 15, 20 years.
It's crazy, and I do not think they probably do know, but the sheer shock of going into the championship will it will be a real absolute culture shock to the system. I go back to the year 2005, and I remember the championship began a week, was it 2008? I think it was 2008, a week earlier than the Premiership. And I remember the producer at the time, Porrick Coyle, there was a Gaelic match on, and he thought, well, we'll get a couple of championship matches to sort of pad the programme out. And I was sent to Carrick Rangers the first day of the season, and they were playing Portadown, right? And it was the year, I think, it was at Portadown, they forgot to get the form in, and there was some administrative issue, right? And I remember the game kicked off, and there was no linesmen, no assistant referees. And I remember Ronnie McFall screaming, what the hell's going on here? What the hell's going on here? And he made the protest.
Second tier of Irish League football in 2009 didn't have people on the line.
And we were sitting in the press box and we're going, that's offside. But you're relying on the referee from the centre circle. And they actually went on to win the championship that season because I covered the game. They beat Donegal Celtic 2-0 up there. And Donegal Celtic were in me a shout, but you knew Portadown. They brought 1,200 fans to the middle of West Belfast, not an incident. But the first game of that season, I think Ronnie McFall went, what in the name of goodness have we got ourselves into? Because somebody had come through, almost scored, and it was definitely offside from the stand. And Ronnie just couldn't appreciate this. But it's the little things. For me as a reporter, it's the lack of a press box and somewhere to actually put a jotter. And even, things like plugs and all. I was down at Loughgall. The last time I was down at Loughgall when we were in the championship, there wasn't a press box. I was standing behind the goal in that balcony. When I got down and was sent round to the far side where there was a whole press facility, which you need to get into the championship, or sorry, the Premiership. So you can see those little things make a difference. Even things like team sheets, other things like, you're up close and personal.
You persevere.
You persevere, you get on there, and it's going to be so interesting next season because 16 teams and 4 coming up from the PIL. Those 2 teams, Crusaders and Glenavon, don't want to get into that mix.
You have intrigued me now. I've went back to the IFA Championship, as it was called, back in 2008, 2009 for the children amongst us. What you're referring to there was a Portadown. You had to apply to be in this brand new 12-team top flight. 4 teams were automatically relegated from the 16-team top flight, which we had. And Portadown were disqualified for their application being in late. And it was such a surprise at the time. It's pretty much like, a Coleraine now. They're one of the top 4, top 5 teams at the time, and they were relegated. And then they went to this 17-team championship at the time. I'm going to tell you these teams in reverse order of where they finished. Killymoon Rangers.
Oh, goodness.
Can you tell me where they're from?
They're from County Tyrone. Covered them playing Glentoran once. It's at a leisure centre in Cookstown.
Cookstown, pretty much, yeah. You've got Dergview, which has obviously established themselves. Tobermore, Ballyclare, Limavady, Armagh City, Glebe Rangers.
Wow, no, I've never been there. Glebe, where are they? Are they Armagh?
They're Ballymoney.
Correct.
You have Carrick, who finished 10th. Larne, whatever happened to them, finished 9th. It was a big year for Ballymoney because Ballymoney United finished 9th. 8th, sorry. Bambridge Town 7th. Coke United, Ballymallard, Ards, Loughall, Donegal Celtic, and then Portadown champions. 4 points in the end, having played each other the final
That's
day. So
correct, because if DC
no
had a won,
Welders or no Dundela.
oh, East Belfast was a wasteland at that stage because that was the year that Glentoran won the league. So they must have, that must have eclipsed. They must have closed for that year because nobody went to the Duns or the Welders.
I'm just because I can't stop. The 2008-2009 intermediate league: Welders, Dundela, PSNI, Queens, Lurgan Celtic, Anna, Oxford United Stars, Port Stewart, Myola, Weckhurst, Brantwood, and Chimley Corner.
Brantwood.
Fallen giants
Do you
amongst them
know,
all.
it's sad to see if we delve into that PIL now. Lisburn Distillery, wow, what a history they have. They're not in the shake-up this season. It just shows you
No.
the way they might have fallen. Didn't Distillery win the 2010-11 League Cup
Yep.
at Mornview? So for Glenavon and Crusaders, yeah, there is so much at stake this weekend. And if I was Glenavon, I'd be a wee bit pessimistic about it because yeah, it's the overturn of your players, it's the overhaul of the club. I've noticed that the crowds, the main stand at Mourneview has been pretty sparse over the
It's
last number of
yeah.
weeks and months.
You're losing big grounds, big away days for opposite fans
Yeah,
in Seaview and one Mordenview. Two of the real established grounds. You're seeing a bit of the change at Seaview. I look. I'll say this a few times for the end of the season. I think Glenavon could be bounced back better because
hmm
they are expected to have this money, might be able to source players better from the local area, etc., etc. Like Cruz has been such a turnover. They are literally going to be scrapping with Welders and other teams, even Bangor and whoever, to try and get a squad that they can build, but they'll obviously be an attraction. So look, massive game which we'll review in a couple of minutes time here in the pod. Just to mention the other games, like I said, Bangor staying up, Portadown staying up. Ballymena are now staying up, even though they were still in the mix mathematically. We had that game a week and a half ago in cover between Bangor and Ballymena,
yeah,
which got rained off. I was on my way there, and then I was called back. I'll be playing on Tuesday, but it's a bit of a dead rubber. And Carr keep on trucking, but they lose late against Ballymena. And can I talk about it? Benjamin Buchanan Wilston, that is a picture perfect red card, sir.
oh yeah, yeah, absolutely.
That could have been in the first 10 seconds of the game, forget the first 13 minutes, and that would have been a red card. Ouch.
Ouch, absolutely. I was waiting on the crack when I saw that. It was just one of those lunging, oh, you can't pull out of it, you're into it, but when that there's the two legs connected, I was waiting on bone, but I mean, you couldn't get a more perfect red card. It really was shocking. I was looking away when I saw it, but yeah, like you can't blame the pitch, you can't blame whatever, or the way somebody awful.
Just reckless, and unfortunately, I cannot confirm or deny if he is, in fact, that type of player. But a player that we have talked about a fair bit made the difference in the end because late on, 10 men of Carrick, 72 minutes or so, they take the lead, but it's first off from a penalty 2 minutes before the 90, and then deep in injury time, Igor Rakowski. He has adapted to top flight football very well. His goals have come from just opportunities falling to him, and there's been a couple of penalties along the way. But stats wise, it's looking good.
Yeah, he was always a guy that I admired when he was with Armagh City. The one thing about him is, it's a lot of people pronounce it. It's Rutkuski, Rutkuski, and Armagh born and bred. But I knew he would be able to adapt when he came up. Very versatile player, and whenever the Armagh exodus occurred, it's well documented what happened to Armagh City round about Christmas. But Igor Rakuski was one of those hidden gems, was scoring goals, not at the level that Armagh were always at that sort of weren't weren't fighting for any championships, but you give the ball to him in the box. And they say, why has nobody come in and got him? But obviously, he's made that transition very well. Fair play to him. And it was a good win for Ballymena on Saturday. And Oran Kearney, he'll have to take stock at the end of the season because he came in at a bad time. There's an awful lot overheads going on there, especially the pitch. Get that sorted. But funny, I saw him last Tuesday night, and whenever David Jeffrey used to come out at the showgrounds, he was the big fist up to the crowd, and he got the cheer. Orne was a wee bit more meek. He was, he knows that there's a job there to actually, he's in to win over the fans, to get that Ballymena engine ticking again, and yeah, give him time, and let's get the overhead sorted with that club. But they're safe, and good win on Saturday against their near rivals.
Before we run our eye over the big games, we've talked a lot about them already, to be fair, in the top flight penultimate game week. Let's talk about the championship. I've been waiting to have this conversation with you. We were expecting this game this weekend. It's actually being played at 6 o'clock on Saturday between Annie United and Limavady, to be this Glentoran against Larne type matchup. They aren't champions yet, but as you alluded to earlier, Anna, they've fallen away, and Limavady are pretty much champions in waiting. And outside of dotting the I's and crossing the T's, they'll be playing top flight football next season.
Yeah, I've always, since I've known him, Paul Owens, admired his ability to get a team together, to get a squad together, to get a bit of belief in that squad. Everybody I knew before the season began says Limavady, they'll win it. Now, they've only came up 2 years ago to the championship. They came close last year. But yeah, Anna were the team to catch, but they have just been consistent, and they're truly deserving. So you've got a mix of youth and experience, and that forward line for Limavady of John Butcher, Leon Boyd, those guys to me are just waiting to go up into the up into the Premiership. I hope they don't get poached. Paul used to say to me, "Do not mention how good John Butcher is in your report." Okay, didn't he? He was up for the Player of the Year on Saturday evening. But bottom line is they need to build. He should go and have a chat with Lee Feeney, have a chat with Nell Curry, and say what you need to do. They not be playing at the Limavady Showgrounds, because they're going to have to play at Coleraine. And that's because the Limavady Showgrounds needs terracing. It needs a bit of an overhaul as well. Years ago, it was okay. But that'll be a disadvantage to them, Peter. I don't want to write Anna off at this stage, but it's a formality. They're just dotting the I's and crossing the T. I've got to like
6
Limavady.
points the difference, and
Plus
12 goal difference change. Obviously, 6-0, it's all even. It's all even, but yes.
Yeah, and they deserve it. And I'd say after, as I mentioned, the Anna's defeat on Saturday, there will be a stewards inquiry. That club is the McGurgan club. They've come close. They might prove me wrong in the playoffs. Maybe they've had enough experience of these playoffs, but I just think I'm off the view that if it was over one game, like a cup final, it would be for Annie United go and try and win it over 90 minutes. But the two-legged thing, I always look at statistics, and last year's two Irish Cup semi-finals when and Bangor and Larne, sorry, Bangor and Ards got to the semi-final, and watching those two games, Dungannon and Cliftonville, they just outpassed them, outplayed them, and that's what playing at the top level is all about. And okay, Limavady got that fantastic result against Linfield in the Irish Cup, but playing Coleraine was more of a rude awakening. It's just being able to do that next season, and Paul should speak to those who've been through that. But I've really got a liking for Limavady United.
I think there's something about Limavady. There's a bit of a banger about them last year. That base of experience. They're a team that really fights for their manager, and you have those players like Arthur's with Bangor. They have the Butchers and Co. that just, they're a nice blend of, I don't know how many of them are local, but I feel like a lot of them are.
Well, the Lowry's for a start, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And they have benefited a wee bit from this Ballymena and Coleraine exodus, I think. But they've got experience within that team as well, who are players who have played top flight football, who will be ready to go again next year. And if and when they do go up, they will be a tough team to beat. Coleraine is a big away journey in Irish League terms for pretty much everybody. And can they score the goals? That will be the big thing for next year.
Hmm.
but they go in a position as good as anybody has been in the past few years, and they have taken their time. They missed out last year. They had the results in the cup, as you said. They got
Hmm.
the result in the cup this year, and yeah, I get it. Anna have been there and thereabouts for a couple of years, but it must be said for Anna, they are massively punching above their weight.
Wow.
Like this,
Yeah.
do you not think so? Like the fact that they've been within the top half even of the championship to be
Hmm.
in and around maybe winning it for many years
Yeah.
for the other team regionally in Portadown.
Hmm.
It's when you have below them Ards, Institute, Loughgall this year, Welders, Dundela when they had their
Hmm.
run.
Hmm.
It's a real testament that they're even there, I think, again.
Yeah. Okay. Look, the first time I saw Anna was there on a Tuesday night, and they beat Glentoran in a League Cup tie. That was 10 years ago. It was Alan Kernahan's last game there, and I thought, wow. But they're living in the shadow of Shamrock Park. But you look at the other side, you mentioned their Institute, Derry City, they're living in the shadow there. They're now playing down at Mayola Park, while Brandywell Ards have been the nomads for 20 years. Okay. Limavady, if they go up, are going to have to play at the showgrounds, as we said. Anna United, if they'd have gone up, would have been playing at Shamrock Park. The Welders have got a fantastic facility. Newington, they're the poor rivals or the poor relations in North Belfast to Cliftonville. Loughgall, disappointed this season, and Queen's University, we didn't expect them to come from anywhere. But I talk about the haves and the have-nots. uh, this ground, there is an urgent conversation needed about this ground development and the money that's now been stalled. Um, Limavady Showgrounds, the first time I was up there was the time that the David Brewster, who was the chair at the time, put in a cheeky bid to sign Carlos Tevez in 2011. So I was set up to cover the game, and we had to do it from the perspective there was 10,000 people had turned up expecting Tevez to play. But I always found it a great club then, and I'm so pleased for them. But I'd love to see the showgrounds, Lima Valley Showgrounds, ready for action because of a great wee town, Lima Valley. They have that base there, and they're very like two wins in the Irish Cup. They beat Larne, and then this year they beat Linfield, and they didn't get too far against Coleraine, who did a job on them. But yeah, I hope they do what's needed over the summer period to get that squad strengthened, and they don't lose those players like Butcher and Leon Boyd, who are tremendous players.
I think one of the stories from this year in the championship, and they've been, to use that famous bit of football cliche there and thereabouts for a couple of years. Another year, another disappointment for the Welders.
Yeah, it's a bit like the underachievement, and Paul has done all he can over the last. They just can't seem to push it beyond. Now they lost Brian Healy this season. Last season, Tiernan went to Larne. Uh, they can produce these players, but they can't hang on to them, and the club is getting income and whatever. I don't know. You've three clubs there in East Belfast. To me, Dundela and the Welders are just living in the shadow of Glentoran. It's impossible in East Belfast to sort of get that core support or to get that, momentum because they benefit from the fact when Glentoran's not playing on a Saturday, they get a few more people up at their games. But when Dundela said a couple of seasons ago that they couldn't go up because the pitch wasn't wide enough, people were saying, look, that's Dundela's always has been B division because, they will make money with crowds in the bar and whatever. That ambition is not there because Dundela would have had to play at the Oval. And, you say to yourself, have they, the Welders, brilliant facility, fantastic. I'd love to see it packed. But, you know, where, I just don't know. If you're a Welders fan, you go there season in, season out. It's like the life of Bran. I've known this team is the Messiah because I've followed enough of them. Um, they just seem they could put on the fantastic displays, score the goals, and they'll dazzle. And then the next week, wow, it'll just get duffed. What do
Could
you do?
then those within the club potentially think maybe it's time, because it's been rumoured, let's be fair, is Paul Keys tenure there maybe under threat? Will he maybe want to change things up?
I don't know. As Paul's been there since 2022, I believe, and very likable guy, very knowledgeable about football. It's up entirely to the members of the board of directors at the Welders what they wish to do going forward. But as we say that if for the last number of seasons it just hasn't peaked, they haven't progressed, and they're still within that. What do they do? They need to shake it up again and maybe sort of look for somebody who's floating about, who's free within the league. But as I said, the Welders great club to go to because you're welcomed. You get access to the players. You can chat away to the manager, and I always call them a cup of tea club. There's a lot of cup of tea clubs out there where you'll get asked, "Do you want a cup of tea?" about 5 times between the car park and the reporting spot. And for the facility they have, I just think it needs Premiership football to generate that. Uh, it would be great to see last season, for example, when Portadown came there, when Bangor came there in the final match, the place was packed. It was great, fantastic atmosphere. Um, but the Welders, they're always thereabouts, but always the bridesmaid, never the bride.
Yeah, I think it's another big year for them, and they'll be one of the teams that either Glenavon or Crusaders will think that they'll be coming back in strong
Hmm.
again next year, with them hoping that this was next year's finally going to be the year for the Welders. Strange top six, Loughgall came back down. They were going to have to try and reset themselves. It just hasn't worked out. Queens have worked their way up into the top half. Newington, speared on by the Donnellys and co. In section B, Institute have been up and down. Ards again just kind of flattered to deceive a wee bit. Warren Point established themselves back in the top flight. Ballymallard, just simply aren't the force they used to be. Dundela, this was a total rebuild year, and it doesn't really matter that they're 11th. And then right there at the bottom, 102 goals conceded
I
at
watched
Armagh
that.
City.
I watched that disintegration at first hand, and it was awful to watch. And basically, I went down to Armagh one day, and at half one, they hadn't 9 players, right? And I know Aidan Murphy down there as a stalwart of the club, and it was horrible. They were put out of the Irish Cup, and it was just a low point. But okay, they rallied uh, at this stage. But my goodness, 102 goals. But the Armagh are going to be in that division next season. And unless they do things radically, and I know at the club there's awful fallouts and there was an awful exodus, but there was no trap door for them this season, Peter. And I,
Well,
I
that,
just,
that meant they didn't have to really
yeah, but
react
they
straight
had
away to this
pride.
exodus.
But I look at these clubs, and most of these clubs would have been, within our tenure. They had their go in the Premiership. Your Ball and the Mallards, not that long ago, they were in the Irish Cup final. Warren Point, I mean, they were thereabouts in the Premiership. Ards, the history that club has there. And to see where they are, Institute, I know they're waiting to get that ground, to get that identity on the water side. Loughgall and Darren Murphy, okay, came back. They were favourites coming into this, but my God, when you're not performing, this championship will just suck you into the middle of it, and that's why Limavady and Anna have prevailed because the Welders just couldn't get on beyond what they were doing. And you look at those names in there, and if Glenavon or Crusaders go down into that next season, you're asking the question. It's easy to get into. It's like the Hotel California. It's so hard to get out of.
Well, it's going to have four new roommates by all accounts. This has kind of been up in the air a wee bit, but we're continuing on with the idea that it will go to 16, and then the door will be not officially shut behind it, but maybe could be, depending on if whoever takes over the third tier or the expanded beyond verse of the two top flight leagues in Irish League football. Whatever the PAL is, it will be without the four top teams. Is that right? Pretty much once this league's over, the top four teams get their place, and everybody else is just going to have to hope
It's a bit strange, isn't
relegation
it?
gets reinstated.
Because it's not as if all the teams are, at the same level. Some have played 22, some have played 18. So we don't know
I think
what's going to happen. But the one thing I will say, and we talked about 2008, 2009, is that we had that Portadown and Donegal Celtic at that stage. And you mentioned some of the teams that were in that. We're going back into that scenario of a 16-team championship. And you look in that PIL, some of the historic names, like Lisburn Distillery, as I mentioned, those clubs are going to drop out of football in theory. And
they have no
when
hope to still either 12th. They aren't finishing top four.
I mean, Ballyskay was, I can remember going to Ballyskay and Paul Hunter was there, great guy who used to do the Lisburn Star, the Ulster Star. And I just sort of think because, as I say, Crusaders, Glenavon, you look at it, Donegal Celtic, where are they? They're at the Ballymena League. They were, thereabouts for a number of years in the Premiership. Institute, Ards, wow, you look at Ards season there. Wow, Warrenpoint Town, Ballina we always used to say about the Fermanagh, it was great for the Western leagues to get Ballina in. It was always a great journey to go down to it. They always give a great game against Glentoran or Linfield, and it was great down there under the lights. This pyramid, what is sustainable for how many clubs is this sustainable for, Peter? It remains to be seen. And I can look at that championship, and we've talked about the teams that are living in the shadow of other teams. Your Anna United's, Newington, and Dundela, and the Harlan and Wolf Welders. What is sustainable on a longer term basis within a league structure for clubs that are living in the shadow? Are we too small to sustain this? I suppose that's a debate Jared Lawler could talk about, but we're just looking at this here, and it's looking good. But we talk about the Irish Cup final, um, an occasion, but I don't think Windsor Park will be anywhere near filled for that. And you look back at the League Cup final, Windsor Park was not full for the League Cup final between Linfield and Glentoran. And once the big Belfast team dropped out of the Irish Cup final, the attendance figure just drops completely. So I go to these championship games week in, week out. And do you know that joke about what time do you kick off? And they say, what time can you make it at? Somebody said to me when I started doing football years and years ago, you'll be at every hole in the hedge and in Northern Ireland. And it's absolutely true. And you've been to Dergview, no?
Yeah.
Dergview is like keep driving from Strabane, or no, sorry, from Oma. And as soon as you hit the green phone boxes, you've gone too far. Just come back, right? It is really isolated out there, and their games always seem to be called off. But how you get that on a longer term basis, how you get that Belfast centric league within 30 miles of Belfast, and you keep sustaining that beyond the M1 at Dungannon is just something that needs to be looked at. And then I'm looking at the structure here and looking at the teams in the championship and indeed in the Premiership. It all comes back to me when you've got a 16 team league next year in that championship, whichever side, if indeed both of them are sucked in from the Premiership, it'll be a shock to the system, Peter. Complete shock.
Well, I know you're not there week in, week out in the PIL, but it looks as though the teams that are going to take their place, Mola Park, I've been up around there for a long time. It's just the quirk of it. Strabane Athletic, currently 20 games played, sitting there in 40 points. Newry,
Well, they came through
22
this
games.
season, Strabane Athletic, and
Yeah,
they got a good
five
run.
wins on the bounce.
Not only that, Myola Park, like if you lose Lisburn Distillery, if you want a team of history, Myola Park, Lord Myola, first winners of the Irish Cup. And from what I can see, it's the most picturesque ground in the Irish League, right? Mill Meadow, I looked at it. I think it's just off the main road there that brings up the Mahara Felt. And it's beautiful with the trees, etc. I always love going to a new ground, Peter, because it gets to the point where you get fed up going to places like where was I on Saturday? Uh, with the championship, I've been to so many new grounds, but with four teams coming up next season, I love the prospect of going out to a number of new grounds. And Strabane Athletic, wow. Do you remember they had the Glens coming down in the
They
Irish Cup,
did.
and then they
Rained
had to play
off.
the game at the Oval? Wow.
Yeah. Well, Newry, they'll be holding on. There's plenty of teams still trying to get that third, fourth, and
Uh,
you might say that second place with Strabane, but they're on such a roll they look good, and the teams in the mix: Newry third, Dollingstown fourth. Albeit both those teams have played 22 games.
Mm-hmm.
37 points for Dollingstown. Rathryland Rangers, again, only recently up in the PIL in the past 2 seasons. They're 5 and 2 points behind them and 2 games in hand. Ballymacash, a wee bit behind, haven't played 22. Ballyclare, 24 games played, 33. So they're a wee bit off. So, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
Ballymacash has been up there knocking on the door, and,
It'll be disappointing for Gary Hamilton. And
yeah,
also, when you consider they had the Glentoran down at the Friday night game in the Cup couple of years back. But Newry, I forgot about Newry and Stuart King. I would love to see, great character, love to see him back in the championship. And I loved Newry Town, Newry City, Dorothy Taylor, brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And that club. And Institute's the other one. I used to love going up the Institute, but they're playing at the Brandywell. But
yeah.
it's just the sustainability on a longer term basis, Peter, you know.
Okay, this weekend we all said it. Friday night is where all the eyes are gonna be at. Glentoran, Larne. You had this earlier on as a draw, a low scoring draw. Are you still sticking with it?
Yeah, but the beauty is, Peter, is that I will be watching that game on the iPlayer on Friday night because it's a do or die game. And I think it could be, in my view, it could be. I think Larne will play a professional game. They will close it down. They're capable of doing it unless Glentoran get an early breakthrough. This could be a scoreless draw, in my view. A disappointing scoreless draw for the punter watching.
A Larne victory means they're champions. I think Glentoran are gonna get it 2-1. Maybe their hopes dashed, and we'll all talk about it next week. The permutations, if we see a Glens victory, but all to play for both sides, and they're both coming in it, I think, fairly healthy across the board. Yeah, huge stuff going on there. The rest of the games, Ballymena Portadown, it is a friendly and all but name. We'll see if Niall Curry tries to get a victory before the end of the season, so they don't go 10 games without a win at the end of the
Mm-hmm,
season.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
They do they bring in youth, or does he just try and reshuffle that squad? Ballymena, similar. What will they do? Bangor against Carrick. By all accounts, Lee Finney wants to finish this season with a plum. I could see him going in there to Carrick and maybe sneaking a win. In turn, that could be that weird game that just goes back and forward. A bit like the Carrick Ballymena game last week, and it's multiple goals either way. Cliftonville, Dungannon. Maybe Cliftonville, it's at home game for them. Will they try to get a bit of revenge, perhaps?
Mm-hmm.
Linfield, Coleraine. I expect Coleraine to win out there, maybe 2-0 in the same type of fashion which we saw Linfield play against Larne. Glenavon Cruise at Moorview Park. What does your gut tell you?
My gut tells me that Crusaders turned a corner last week. They're going in with confidence. Glenavon will have to be like Glentoran on Friday night. They'll have to really have a go for it. But at this stage, are we rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic? As in, is it written in the stars? It's too much for Glenavon at this stage. Also, the fact that even if they do win, Crusaders get that second bite on the final day. We don't know. I just think the final day, like Saturday, is going to be if there's nothing to play for, it's a lottery. I just feel that Glenavon, they will live to regret that start to the season. And it was too little, too late. Okay, it was game, it was valiant, but you cannot change the past. And the past is the start of the season. And I'm very friendly with in my work, Fred Cobain, a long-standing councillor in Belfast City Hall, who's a Crusaders fanatic. And I was winding him up saying I'd be able to sort of point out to you where all these grounds are in the championship next season. But my goodness, he came in this morning and he says the feel-good factor on Saturday at Seaview, he says they're going to bring that next week. And I think it's a wee bit like George Bush saying we're too big to go bust or too big to go down. Glenavon are saying the same thing, but I still say, Peter, the shock factor to either or both of these clubs is going to really be a rude awakening.
The way this is set up, whoever goes down, it'll be a blow because we've seen previous years where teams are down and they just limp. limp towards the championship, and they never really got
Lock
going
all, for
at one
example,
point.
today this year.
Yeah, exactly. Teams you just go, they're down there. We'll have to see. They can still do it. And they're so poor. Both these teams have had these potential highs, these big lows. I think both supporters have felt we're down, we're out. They've also felt, oh, we're back, we're going to do it. It's fine now. And whoever is relegated from one of these two teams will have been through the ringer, and they'll feel as though we've let ourselves down.
And it's, yeah.
That's really. I know that's true of every single team that gets
Mhm.
relegated, but on this occasion, both of these teams, whoever does get relegated, they'll look back and go, "We'll let ourselves down," and it could be like this afternoon on
The
Saturday.
shock factor is because, okay, the teams that fall out of the Premiership, Portadown have done it a few times. We've seen that. They've come back up. Loughgall went up. But it's also the teams that come out of the Premiership, like Ards. Okay, Ards haven't been at Castlereagh Park in 20 odd years. It's a very loyal band of supporters. But two teams, in my view, who are absolute cornerstones of Premiership football, Crusaders and Glenavon. I mean, their grounds are Premiership. I mean, Crusaders at the far side have lost that terrace. Big plans there. The Shore Road, big games. Cliftonville coming, Boxing Day, whatever. Could you imagine if they went down? Crusaders to lose that. Linfield coming. It's the sheer income that they're going to lose. And Glenavon, you talk about Portadown coming, Linfield coming. That far stand at Mournview Park is packed out whenever the Belfast teams are there. My goodness, if Myola Park or Institute come down on a Tuesday night in February, you will know the difference.
Well, Barry, I'm going to say that I think it's going to be a 1-1 draw. Perhaps 10 minutes ago, both teams just set themselves down, or it could be a gangbuster game. But we'll have to
This is
see.
the beauty of what happens, and I think we were building ourselves up for this do or die Limavady Anna game, and they're putting that live on TV at 6 o'clock because that was going to be the standout fixture. I heard that Niffle TV were going to try and take that do or die Crusaders Glenavon game, maybe put it on at 8 o'clock that night. That shows you the scope to which the live football is being looked at across this leagues or these leagues. But the sting's been taken out of that Anna game. They know they're second. Limavady just go down there, and Anna will be sitting looking above them and saying, which one of these two is coming down. They might surprise you. They did fall apart at the end of the season, but they're due to get their luck's due to change in these playoffs, Peter.
Well, there's one thing everybody's been waiting for us to talk about, and it happened on Saturday evening: the Niffle Football Awards. Now, we did have the NI Football Awards for a while
Mm-hmm.
when it was the Football Writers, which has all the prestige behind it, and then they joined up with Niffle. They've now went their separate ways, and curiously, Niffle now do their awards slightly earlier before the season's over, which it has drawn some feelings of questions around it. We'll go through the way it all came together. I'm not quite sure how they picked these. Was it players or was it just people within Niffle? We all sat on Saturday night with bated breath at the edge of our seat. Who was going to take home Club Marketing Campaign of the Year? And it was, of course, the Linfield Home Kit launch. But outside of that, the other big awards were the usual. Player of the Year in the various leagues, Goal of the Season. Joe Thompson got that for Glentoran against
Yeah.
Linfield. David Parkhouse got the PIL Player of the Year. Unsurprisingly, Stephen Laurie won the Championship Player of the Year. And then the man who's expected, I would say, to win and get a clean sweep of many league-wide Player of the Year, Patrick Hubin. Now, interestingly, their nominees for Player of the Year was Patrick Hubin, as well as Cammy Palmer, also from Glentoran, as well as Chris Gallagher from Larne. The Football Writers have released their nominees slightly differently. They've went for Hubin, as well as Ferguson from Larne, who I've been pulling for to be a nominee. I don't think he's going to win it now, but I think
Mm-hmm.
should have been a contender
Mm-hmm.
until his falling off. And then Patching from Coleraine. I think that probably should be Joel Cooper, but they're the top three for the Football Writers. No real complaints there. I mean, it is odd to see Manager of the Year. It goes to Gary Havern, where that's someone who could be
Oh,
lifting a trophy or could throw their league charge
It could be a
all away.
bittersweet
Yeah.
chalice there. I think it's kind of strange because it's always the manager that wins the league. Okay, if this all turns out, say for example, if Michael O'Connor saves Glenavon, right? And then you've Gary Haverin, say Larne don't win the league, and the awards had been a week later, right? Okay, you need to acknowledge who threw out that season, but it's a subjective phenomena. What is a better achievement for Michael O'Connor to come in management wise and turn that side around and save them ultimately, or for Gary Haverin to guide Larne to the title, given the resources and whatever you look at? It's strange because I knew it was on, but I was interviewing Paul Owens on Saturday evening, and he had a tuxedo on, and Stephen Laurie was there the same. They all had the tuxedos and the smells of brute and Old Spice, and they were heading down. Now it was a very slick operation from what I saw. Jim Boyce, for example, got the Lifetime Achievement Award. The Titanic building, of course, looked great. I don't know what those glow sticks were, to be truthful. I saw a
Yeah.
picture that everybody had the glow stick up. But yeah,
I don't think they'd
to
be allowed at
me,
games, but sure, whatever. No pyrotechnics.
Peter, I always remember going to football writers do. I used to be in
Uh-huh.
the Europa and the BBC took a table, but that was after the cup final and everybody could sit and relax
Yeah, I don't think
because
there's many
there
pints
was
being had
nothing.
by players from either of the top teams if ahead of this big
Yeah,
game.
everybody could let their hair down, could relax because the season was done and dusted. Okay. And there was one year we were there, it was 50 years since Northern Ireland had played in Sweden. And a lot of the players were guest of honours, your Billy Binghams and people like that. And it was a great occasion. And of course, the night bar in the Europa, I think it was about half
Hmm.
five in the morning, the last people were leaving. But to me, it sort of was a wee bit premature. Maybe that's just because of date wise, etc. But you're tempting fate because when you're interviewing Gary Haver, well, Gary, player of the season, whatever, or manager of the season, blah blah. It's been a great season. And then a week later, this all turns around and say somebody's left very
Yeah.
disappointed who's been given the award. It doesn't really, that's no payback for if things go wrong at the end of the season. But like these things are driven by who's been the best up to
Yeah,
that point
absolutely.
over the
Yes,
season.
of course, absolutely. And yes, it's only one awards. I don't know the full details, but I think football writers are maybe the Sunday after the Irish Cup. So, there are your options for awards. There's many other awards. We'll see if how Hubin does in those. But Barry, before actually we go, do you reckon the Laurie brothers will give one more season in the top flight? I know it was up to them to say, oh, we'll try and help them get up. We'll see where
Uh,
we go. Like they are.
Absolutely, in my view, because Philip Larry, and it was referred to on Saturday, they went a goal down Limavady to Newington, and Philip Larry got a yellow card, which means that he's out of the next game. And Paul Owen says he was like a man possessed. He turned that team round. Absolutely. Stephen Larry, player of the season, my goodness, the way those two guys have been the rock, and if they can keep that sort of little mix, get a couple of people in. They've actually signed well too. They've got McNichol
Yeah.
as well as Mikael Kennedy. They've not been able to get in the side because of the Leon Boyd and the John Butchers, etc. So yeah, I've sort of taken a wee liking to Johnny McCune, the secretary up there. Absolutely fantastic. They deserved it. And when they do it, which they will do, I think they'll get the cup perhaps at the Limavady Showgrounds. It'll be their first game back since about November or
Yeah.
something. So yeah, they'll give it another go. You've got the experience there, and yeah, why not?
Barry, it's been a good one, but it's also been a long one. So thank you so much for your time as we start to wrap up what has been season 4
Hmm.
of Kicking Match. Until next time, and it will be next year, no doubt. I look forward to chatting to you soon.
God bless you, Peter.
I should end or start the end with a minor apology. A few did reach out last week, fell through the cracks. It's on me. There was chat that I was going to do a podcast after the Tuesday games because last weekend there was like half a game to talk about, and then everything went down on Tuesday. Plan was we're going to record on a Wednesday, guests, etc. Fell through. Tried to make it happen, just couldn't do it last minute. And alas, it didn't happen. And I hope you enjoyed your big Easter week. But we came back with a bang, with a boom, and big podcasts on the way. What's going to happen this weekend? Let's find out. We've also got Team of the Season, And we've also got, well, you know, the usual total big review. So if you aren't following this podcast on whatever platform you're into, you should, because some of the most listened to podcasts I do all year are coming up. And I know you like them because you listen to them and then you slag me off for them. So thanks for listening. Follow Kick a Match, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, whatever. See you next week. I know you're going to be here. Tally ho.